What is the best way to trade altcoins to get more Bitcoin? I do not recommend that. I only hold self-custody Bitcoin storage. I don't trade any altcoins for Bitcoin. This is not something I recommend at all. But yet, I talk to people every single day about Bitcoin. I read the comments. I see your emails. I talk to people all the time. And everyone says, I'm a Bitcoin maxi. I understand Bitcoin's going up indefinitely. I understand Bitcoin is a really bullish case, but I'm still going to trade some altcoins on the side to get a little bit more Bitcoin. So, I can't stop you. I'm just going to address the topic head on. If you're looking to trade to acquire more Bitcoin, what is the best way for you to trade to buy more Bitcoin? So, this video is going to offend a lot of people, but I love it that way. Let's have a little bit of drama and let's dive into the topic. What is the best way to trade altcoins for more Bitcoin? What are my opinions on the following digital currencies? Solana, XRP, Ethereum, MicroStrategy, and yes, I am jokingly calling MicroStrategy a meme coin. And so we're going to compare those. So if you're going to be trading more altcoins for Bitcoin, which one should you trade? Should you trade Ethereum, XRP, Solana, MicroStrategy? So I'm going to go through some price predictions and basic math for the next 18 months. Which of these is the best for getting the most dollars and more importantly, the most Bitcoin? So again, we all know HODL, right? Hold on for dear life. If you're reading this and if you're watching this video, you're probably one of those people that's not going to listen to me though, and you're still going to trade nonetheless. And so while I can't stop you, I want to at least help prevent you from getting yourself burnt or wrecked and losing a significant portion of your funds, right? So I may not agree with this, but I know the audience, I know you guys, I know that 90% of you have some allocation to some assortment of memes or altcoins or meme stocks or whatever that you're trying to get alpha on to outperform Bitcoin. So I'm going to break down today's video in three different components here. The first part being returns. What are the actual potential returns for these digital currencies? What are the moral implications of investing or speculating in these digital currencies? And what is the risk with investing or speculating in these digital currencies? So first, let's look at the potential returns, comparing Ethereum and Solana. So to me, in my opinion, the best case for Ethereum is Solana, is that they gain lost ground from previous cycles and go to new all-time highs. So if we look at the chart for Ethereum, we see that it goes from roughly 3.7% of a full Bitcoin, what it is right now. And, what we have to keep in mind is that a bullish case, in my opinion, is that it does what last cycle failed to do. Ethereum failed to get a new all-time high against Bitcoin. And so I think it would be really bullish or optimistic, the centralized token, if it were to reach that all-time parity with Bitcoin. Maybe some of you would say it's going to go even higher than the all-time high. We're going to have price discovery on the ETH to Bitcoin pair. I think that's really reaching for the stars, though. I think you'll be very bullish, very happy if Ethereum were to triple and go back to those all-time highs from 2017. I think that is a very bullish case for Ethereum. Not that I personally agree with that. Okay, I think that's your best case scenario. Now with Solana, it's a similar scenario. Solana has significantly outperformed Ethereum, which we'll get to more in just a moment. Again, maybe you could argue or speculate, hey, Solana's just gonna, reach new all-time highs against Bitcoin. It's just gonna keep going up and up and up beyond the all-time high that was seen in late 2021. That's possible, sure, but I think the real problem we have to keep in mind here is that if that happens, we won't know when to sell. Like there's no precedent for it, right? There's nothing inherently valuing this compared to Bitcoin, which we'll get to more in a minute. And so if you don't really know when to sell, like when are you going to sell? Like what is the plan here? Are you going to sell based on time or are you going to sell based on what Bitcoin market cycles are doing? What if the Bitcoin market cycle is different? What if the altcoins still follow a 4-year halving cycle? Or a 4-year, fear and greed cycle. But then what happens if Bitcoin has some sort of major nation state buying into it and then it kind of changes the cycle? I don't know. And that's what we'll get to more in a minute. So again, maybe you could argue that Ethereum or Solana would, skyrocket into the stratosphere and dramatically outperform Bitcoin. That would be approximately a 3x both for Solana and Bitcoin compared to the price right now. So you may double or triple your initial investment in those digital currencies in Bitcoin terms, which of course, if you believe Bitcoin is going to double from here, then that's a 5 or 6x in fiat nominal terms. Now, let's take let's take the let's take XRP It recently had a mega rally. Everyone would not shut up and kept asking me about it, and basically quadrupled in fiat terms. But again, people don't zoom out the chart enough. Everyone's freaking out about this little skyrocketing over here, but everyone's forgetting the fact that it is significantly down against 2021 XRP. It is barely recovered against that. It is significantly down against 2016, 17, 18, the 2015 bubbles and hype periods, right? So this, unlike Solana and Ethereum, like I just don't think it's ever going to reach those all-time highs again. Okay, assuming if Bitcoin goes to 200K, which maybe it won't, I think it will, but assuming Bitcoin goes to 100K and assuming XRP meets that all-time high, that's a 1.5 trillion dollar market cap. Okay, like I'll be honest, I'm surprised how high XRP's market cap still somehow is, but I am incredibly skeptical XRP is going to $1.5 trillion. So I don't think that's realistic, even if you are smoking some kind of drug or mushroom and you think that XRP is going to have this magical bull run that everyone's going to be missing out on, right? And keep in mind, it's already up by a factor of 4. So it's just, in my opinion, not likely to get there. Maybe if you're really lucky, it's going to double against Bitcoin over the course of the next 18 months or so. And again, I don't necessarily believe that. Okay, I don't think that's the case. We're looking at what is the potential upside here. Now let's look at the last one of our quote unquote meme coins here. MicroStrategy, or as I call it, Sailor Coin, because that's basically what you're doing. If you're buying MicroStrategy, you're basically betting on meme or the personification of the meme that is Michael Saylor. Now, of course, Ethereum, Solana, and XRP hold 0 Bitcoin. Okay, that's really important to know. I'll get to that more in a minute when we talk about risk. Michael has described on a few calls and Zoom calls before that something like a 5 to 6 net asset value wouldn't be unreasonable for the stock of MicroStrategy. So maybe that's too bullish and we only get to 4x this bull market cycle. Maybe in some sort of bull mania, a bunch of shorts get wrecked. We have some sort of GameStop or AMC kind of short frenzy, cascading, liquidations upwards. Maybe we get to an 8x, right? If we take the average, the median of a 6x, if we multiply that by the current net asset value, that's basically 3x from today. Here's the NAV multiplier versus Bitcoin price as well. I highly recommend you check that out. Okay, so now let's talk about the moral case, right? Because this video is probably going to get some hate, both from the Bitcoin maxis as well as the degen traders. And again, I'm a Bitcoin maxi. I don't trade Solana, Ethereum, or XRP. I'm just trying to give the case for those degenerates of you that do, things for you to consider. So let's get to the second point and talk about the moral case, okay? All 4 of these tokens, Ethereum, XRP, MicroStrategy, and Solana, all 4 of them are centralized. None of them will ever be the apex money or the apex property of the human race. None of them will do that. So that's the first thing you have to keep in mind. The second thing you have to keep in mind here when it comes to the moral cases for these is that one of these is regulated the most clearly. That would be MicroStrategy. XRP, Solana, and Ethereum are not regulated nearly as much as MicroStrategy. Obviously, if you had a runner-up, that would be Ethereum, given Ethereum has an ETF. However, definitely by far, MicroStrategy is the most transparent. It is the most open. If the centralized manipulators of any 4 of these, or all 4 of these, were to be fraudulent or in collusion, the one that is going to have the most legal recourse in the interest of shareholders is going to be MicroStrategy, the regulated entity here. Now, I personally believe that Bitcoin is a technology that reduces the monetary incentive to war and kinetic violent force while also accelerating humanitarian cases. And only one of these 4 investments actually incentivizes the adoption of that technology. Of course, that is MicroStrategy, okay? Every single year, 1 million people, mostly kids, die or have some disability because of lead poisoning. Every single year, 4 million people freeze to death in the winter or die from cold-related illnesses. Every single year, hundreds of thousands of people die from starvation. And starvation is 100% preventable in this period and point in history because it's just a pure lack of inefficiency and government corruption, everything of that sort, right? We have had a massive civil war in Ethiopia that has claimed 500,000 lives. We have a massive war going on between Israel and Hamas right now, which has also claimed tens of thousands of lives. We have a massive civil war that just a couple days ago, before the time of recording, collapsed in Syria with Assad's regime going out. That's hundreds of thousands of deaths, hundreds of thousands of deaths in Yemen, in Burma or Myanmar. in multiple other countries and places around the world, right? There are millions of deaths that are fully preventable and are only happening because of a lack of inefficiency, cooperation, and massive incentive to proxy wars. Obviously, the one I'm omitting here is the Ukraine Russia conflict, also has claimed hundreds of thousands of deaths. My point is that there is a technology out there that is reducing the incentive for these kinds of violence. It's not going to eliminate them fully. Obviously, it's not. But if we think in terms of probabilities, what are the odds that Bitcoin reduces kinetic warfare by 1%? Well, and if there are a million needless deaths from all these conflicts in just the last couple of years alone, I think it was about 1.5 million people have died in the last decade alone from these conflicts. That's 15,000 people that are going to have deaths prevented because of Bitcoin. What if Bitcoin reduces the incentive to war by 5%, right? What if Bitcoin reduces the number of people freezing to death in the winter by 10%? Because we have a fiat system artificially forcing up energy prices for the world's poorest and most vulnerable people every single year, right? What happens if we have fiat demonetize energy and oil and electricity, right? Like you holding Bitcoin is a moral action because everything you do in your life is a moral action. And so when you are buying these 4 tokens, only one of them has a direct aligned monetary incentive with that technology that has a direct aligned incentive with saving people's lives. Okay, when you're buying XRP, you're not accelerating that mission. When you buy Solana, you're not accelerating that mission. Maybe you make money, maybe you don't. You probably don't. But even if you make money, you have to keep that in mind. I'm not saying it's inherently evil to be doing that, right? I mean, obviously, if you buy the S&P 500 or you buy various stocks in the stock market, you're investing in companies like Lockheed Martin, right? So obviously, there are companies that actively, profit on conflict. I'm not saying that, everything other than Bitcoin is morally equivalent, but what I am saying is that that's something you have to keep in mind. That's something you have to sleep with, that you're investing in a zero-sum game, competing protocol against Bitcoin. You're actively de-accelerating the Bitcoin standard when you invest in magical unregistered tokens made out of thin air, right? So that's just something to keep in mind when you're going to be buying any one of these, right? Buying MicroStrategy forces Sailor's premium on Bitcoin, forces it up. And this is the fastest way to accelerate entrepreneurs building medium of exchange technology for Bitcoin. There's not a lot of medium exchange technology for Bitcoin yet, right? There's not a lot of side chains, higher chains, other kinds of things. And when you force the price of Bitcoin up, when you have Bitcoin be more valuable, that is precisely what incentivizes entrepreneurs to build cool stuff. I like to compare it like with digital Manhattan, right? If you think of the actual Bitcoin itself as the land, the base layer of the island of Manhattan, and you think of all future technology, sidechain, higher chain, whatever, as buildings built atop of that land, forcing the value of that land up is the fastest way to incentivize entrepreneurs to justify the expense of building a 10-story steel building instead of a 2-story wooden building, right? And so I personally believe that Bitcoin has a massive use case for helping billions of people that are currently unbanked in the world in the developing countries. But the problem is that Bitcoin has priced them out. A Bitcoin transaction at the base layer, the actual physical dirt, might be $1, $2, $3, $5, $10, and that is priced out the bottom 2 or 3 billion people. What we desperately need is we need more medium of exchange solutions. We need more Lightning. We need more Liquid. We need more federations and all kinds of other things at higher layers atop of Bitcoin. And the fastest way to get there and serve those 2 billion people that desperately need this is to force the value of Bitcoin price up. Okay, it's a little bit indirect, but it's really important. The greater incentive you give for transaction fees to go up and for the cost of Bitcoin to go up, the greater incentive there is for people to enter the market and solve that problem. So maybe you could argue that, oh, well, like Solana is a smart contract platform, and maybe it's going to develop stuff that's going to be integrated in future Bitcoin layers. But, you can believe that. Personally, I doubt that. I think it's going to be unlikely. And even if that were to happen, just because the technology Solana invents is valuable doesn't necessarily mean that the token is going to go up in price, right? You can have a totally valuable product or service, but the stock of that be completely worthless because it's not registered and they have an inflation rate for their essentially controlled tokens and they can turn it off anytime. So my summary for this moral case here, just to wrap up this big second point, is that I personally believe Bitcoin will prevent 100 million needless deaths over the course of the next few decades, right? And if you want to learn more about that, I talk about that here in this thread. You can look that up on my Twitter page. Just search Luke Broyles 100 million lives saved or whatever, right? And I firmly believe that when it comes to reducing the number of deaths from war, starvation, inefficiency, pollution, all those things, assuming some sort of marginal percentage reduction of those causes of death, I think Bitcoin could easily save tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of lives, forgetting the fact that, you know, we also always have the ever-growing threat of global war or conflict because of fiat misalignment of incentives. So my point is that returns and risk aside, just from thinking how to trade your altcoins or stocks for more Bitcoin, you have to keep in mind you're voting with where you plant your capital. You're voting with your feet. Every single dollar you place is a vote for a kind of future you want to see. And maybe you say, I'm going to temporarily vote in this temporary future of a given altcoin to then profit back into the true movement, which is Bitcoin. Maybe you want to do that. I personally wouldn't want to do that, though, because I think the stakes are so high. I would rather just focus on Bitcoin personally, because I don't have a clear conscience anymore of speculating in things that don't accelerate that mission. Okay. Between XRP, Solana, Ethereum, and by the way, you can throw in Dogecoin, you can throw in Shiba Inu, you can throw in all kinds of other things, Cardano or whatever. You could throw in all those, and you could throw in MicroStrategy, which again, I jokingly consider as an altcoin, or Sailor coin. Which can you confidently say of these different options is going to yield the largest indirect impact on saving lives? I think genuinely that is MicroStrategy, right? Am I saying that if you buy MicroStrategy, you're a humanitarian, you're a good person, it's only doing it out of the goodness of your heart? No, of course you're not. The whole freaking stock is up like a factor of 3 or 4 in the last couple weeks or month or so alone, right? And so I'm not saying that if I am trying to appeal to the humanitarian side of you, and I'm also trying to appeal to the profit side of you, right? The self-interest and the selfless interest, right? I'm trying to appeal to both here and get a good varied opinion here, but genuinely, which technology has the possibility of saving 100 million lives? Bitcoin. Which one of these centralized tokens can you buy that is going to directly monetize and incentivize the acceleration of that technology? MicroStrategy. When you're buying XRP, you're not helping Bitcoin layer 2 development. When you buy Solana, you're not helping the miners of the Bitcoin network be funded, right? When you buy Ethereum, you're not helping Michael Saylor issue more convertible notes to give governments and major corporations more Bitcoin exposure to the treasury and therefore enshrine Bitcoin more into nation states, right? It's like Bitcoin is the Trojan horse. And when you're speculating on these, derivatives that you're hoping go up in price as the Trojan horse goes up in price, it's like, it's just something to keep in mind here, okay? Just something to keep in mind, okay? Now, again, I briefly mentioned this earlier. Let's say all 4 of these are complete frauds. Let's say Michael Saylor is a fraud. Let's say Vitalik Buterin is a fraud, right? XRP, I don't think we have to go too far there, right? And let's say the same thing with Solana, right? If all 4 of them scammed everyone that ever bought them, which of these 4 is actually going to have their token creators on the hook, right? Obviously, it's going to be MicroStrategy. You could probably argue a similar thing for Ethereum since it has an ETF, right? But the reality of the matter is that MicroStrategy is the most transparent with investors. They are the most transparent with their token creation, right? If you want to call stocks tokens, because that's basically what they are, right? This corporate paper, it is the one least likely to scam people. So if you're buying these other tokens that aren't MicroStrategy, you're going to be taking some sort of chance that this thing just rug pulls everyone, including you, by the way, and you directly extended that scheme from continuing on, right? Am I saying that I'm predicting they're all 4 going to crash anytime soon? No, they probably won't. They're probably all going to linger on for a very long time, right? But giving Solana, Ethereum, XRP, or other digital tokens your monetary energy is a vote in favor of a zero-sum game competition against Bitcoin. You are buying the altcoins to get more Bitcoin, but in you buying the altcoins to get more Bitcoin, you're reducing the probability ever so slightly that Bitcoin survives. Or maybe you don't reduce the probability it survives, but maybe you extend the timeline at which Bitcoin actually succeeds and wins. And maybe you're okay with that, right? I'm not saying that you're inherently this evil person because you've done that, but I am saying that you are voting on the future with every single dollar that you allocate. You have the understanding, you understand Bitcoin. Why on earth aren't you all in from a moral perspective alone, right? It doesn't matter if Bitcoin goes to $10 million or not. What matters is that the future is better than the present, that the future is more peaceful, more beautiful, more prosperous than the present. And if Bitcoin doesn't survive to get here from there, none of this matters. What I mostly care about are people surviving, people living, people thriving and flourishing. I don't care about Bitcoin going to tens of millions of dollars if I'm pricing it in terms of tokens that are worthless, right? This is my encouragement. This is my point. If you were actually in Bitcoin for the mission and not for the gains, why are you allocating some percentage of your portfolio, 40% of your portfolio, 20%, 10%, even 5% of your portfolio to something that is not a part of the mission and actually antithetical to the whole mission in its first place, right? If you, and maybe some of you are a little surprised in being so, frustrated with these altcoins, despite that I've made this video with the clickbait to get you to watch it. I mean, come on, I'm a Bitcoin maxi. What did you expect? So my point is that if you're buying these altcoins, you're fighting the very movement and a gamble to get a larger share of the results of that movement in the first place, right? You're saying, I believe in Bitcoin. I want a larger share of the Bitcoin network. So let me speculate in something that's actively going to hurt the Bitcoin network in the first place. And then that's magically going to work out for me. It's like, even if you can sleep at night with that, you're being a hypocrite to yourself and you're actually undoing the entire rest of your portfolio, right? If you have 90% allocation to Bitcoin, 10% allocation to some centralized altcoin, that 10% is sucking energy away from the 90%, and you're actually weakening that 90%. Obviously, any one person's portfolio is such a small amount in the big grand scheme of things. You're not actually doing anything that's measurable to Bitcoin, but it's just the principle. It's the principle of the thing, right? So now let's get to what is perhaps the most important thing for me to hammer into your brains here. Risk, okay? I've given out a lot of scenarios here with the potential upsides of the different altcoins and this and that, the other, but we got to talk about the risk. What are the probabilities that these things actually happen? In my opinion, not all of these options have equal probability of happening, right? Let's talk about Ethereum. The main risk with Ethereum is it had two big narratives. It had the money narrative of ultrasound money, and it also had the tech narrative, but both of those narratives, in my opinion, have been gobbled up. The money narrative has been gobbled up by Bitcoin, and the tech narrative has been gobbled up by Solana. It is very hard to refute that. All the investors that are entering Bitcoin/crypto for the hard money aspects, they're going to Bitcoin. They're not going to Ethereum. I've not heard anyone that's coming to Bitcoin for the hard money aspects going to Ethereum, right? And likewise, if new people are coming in to crypto and digital tokens to pursue the better tech, they're not going to Ethereum. Everyone I see and talk to is going to Solana, right? And so that's the big problem, in my opinion, for Ethereum, is that it had a couple big narratives, and over the last couple of years, as Ethereum has moved to proof of stake, it has lost the two big narratives in its favor, okay? And I think that's really evidenced by the actual numbers of what we're seeing. Ethereum has failed to make a new all-time high against Bitcoin last cycle, okay? Even though Ethereum has a smaller market cap, even though Ethereum has had years of development and progress and new tech to be rolled out, even despite all those things, it failed to make a new all-time high last cycle. Now, granted, it did have a higher low. That is true, but it failed to make a new high. And personally, if I'm going to be speculating on some sort of centralized token like Ethereum that has changed its monetary policy 6 times and is something with significant levels of risk, I want to see clear evidence of a higher high in the future. So from a risk perspective, maybe you could kind of hope it's going to triple and reach Bitcoin highs like it did 5 or 7 years ago or whatever. Maybe you could hope that and cross your fingers, but I don't know, man. It doesn't look like the highest probability outcome, in my opinion, right? Maybe it will break that trend and actually make an all-time high in the next year or two, but I'm just not seeing it, especially with all the momentum Bitcoin has behind it. Also, very importantly, I think a big sign for this, the Ethereum ETF has had miserable results, okay? To read this excerpt from this article here, okay, comparing the Bitcoin ETF to the Ethereum ETF. The Ethereum ETF displayed a more tempered inflow trajectory. Within its first 30 days of the ETF launch, the Ethereum ETF experienced an outflow, not an inflow, an outflow of roughly 170,000 Ethereum. And despite that, the total number of Ethereum under management reached 2.7 Ethereum, approximately 6 or 7 billion, which accounts for 2% of Ethereum's circulating supply. So you can say, oh, Luke Broyles is a maxi. He hates all the altcoins. He's just, crapping on your bags or whatever. Ignore him to the moon, or unregistered securities are just magically going to pump into the stratosphere. Okay, you could say that if you want. I'm just telling you what anecdotally I'm talking to investors. Everyone that's buying the altcoins is doing it for the exact same reason you do. I understand Bitcoin. I'm a maxi. I'm going to trade for more Bitcoin, right? And I'm going to dump it, right? Everybody wants to dump it. And so they're just slowly dumping it over time. My point is that Bitcoin ETF had the most record-shattering ETF explosion in the beginning here of 2024. Investors were flocking to it. It did so much better than the gold ETF. In a matter of a year or less, the Bitcoin ETFs are going to surpass the gold ETFs. Compare that to Ethereum, where it was an outflow in the first 30 days. And it's not been really that good or dramatically well since then either, right? Wall Street and traditional finance is just not having the same interest in Ethereum. And the reason why is because they have a fiduciary duty to their clients, and they're not in these things to speculate it for more Bitcoin, right? So my encouragement here is that maybe Ethereum outperforms Bitcoin in the next year or two. Maybe it does, right? And for those of you watching with Ethereum bag holders, I hope it does, so you can dump. But my genuine concern here is what happens if Bitcoin has nation state adoption and Ethereum falls another 50% against Bitcoin to 1.8% of the Bitcoin, right? Maybe Ethereum goes up in terms of dollars. Maybe it doubles, maybe it triples. I don't know. But in terms of Bitcoin, in terms of Bitcoin, will it do the same? I'm just really skeptical of that. Okay, how many countries are you seeing right now lining up to have Ethereum strategic reserves? How many companies are you seeing lining up right now to smash by Ethereum convertible notes, right? It's like, yes, the market cap of Bitcoin is much bigger than that of Ethereum, but the demand is at least an order of magnitude higher for Bitcoin than it is for Ethereum. The catalysts are so much greater for Bitcoin than it is for Ethereum. And Ethereum has such a massive curve of momentum that it has to undo, right? It's been losing momentum since the proof of stake merge about a year or two ago, right? It has been losing momentum. It would have to reverse that negative momentum and gain so much positive momentum that it outpaces Bitcoin. And I just think the risk with that is just super high. Maybe Ethereum doubles against Bitcoin. And if you're one of those degen traders, I hope it does for you. But I think the odds of it falling 50% against Bitcoin are significantly higher than it outperforming, right? So let's take a look at one that many people perhaps would perceive as lower risk, that being Solana. In my opinion, the main risk with Solana is Bitcoin, right? The whole narrative for Solana actually still is alive, that Solana is relatively usable, that Solana is relatively cheap to transact on. We're going to forget the fact that the chain's been shut down multiple times. Forgetting that, ignoring that, we're just focusing on the narrative because people are investing this thing out of a narrative and a meme, not out of necessarily logic or data. So my point is that Solana is the leading contract platform. That is some memeability, that is some incentive. Obviously, Solana has significantly outperformed Ethereum so far this cycle. However, Solana will not be able to compete with safer and more scalable Bitcoin medium of exchange development, right? We have lots and lots of buildings coming to this island of Manhattan, and we have this separate island that is Solana trying to compete with that. And so right now, maybe your token, maybe your blockchain is cheaper, faster, better, or at least it's perceived by the retail investors and degenerate gamblers. Maybe it's perceived that way, but when Bitcoin is valuable enough and we have enough an economic incentive for people to build these more usable features, because keep in mind, Lightning and Liquid are in their infancy when compared to the future, that is just going to dwarf the Solana, right? And ironically, MicroStrategy, this other centralized token, this stock token, accelerates medium of exchange development and investment on Bitcoin. And arguably, MicroStrategy is accelerating the eventual fall of Solana, even if this will take many years. I do think this will take many years, right? But the point is that if Solana just stays flat against Bitcoin, that is still a loss because you have the hours you've invested in studying market cycles or whatever with Solana, and you still have the inflation with Solana, right? Okay, even though Solana's market cap is at an all-time high, its token pair compared to Bitcoin is not yet at an all-time high. It would almost have to double to get there. Why? Because Solana's inflation rate is so high. Standing still is falling behind, just like fiat. And so that, I think, is really important to keep in mind. That is a major part of risk when it comes to Solana's unlock schedule and inflationary scheduling rewards, right? Now, let's get to the one that's a little different. Let's get to the one that's just way out there, right? Let's come to being bullish in XRP, right? When it comes to being bullish in XRP, my opinion is probably your biggest risk, if you're being a degenerate investing in XRP, is that you've probably done a massive dose of drugs in the last few hours, right? Because you're high enough that somehow you think that highness is going to rub off on XRP and it's going to go to the moon because my banks are going to use it as a banking layer, right? I mean, goodness sake. Yeah, sure, maybe XRP can go up, like maybe it does. I don't know. I can't read the tea leaves, but it's much more likely it falls back to where it was just a couple weeks ago, which is a 75% loss. So even comparing to Solana and Ethereum, XRP is just like a whole extra level of crazy risk, right? And no, my banks aren't going to save you. That TikTok narrative that takes 20 seconds of, degenerate brain cells to comprehend is not going to hold up for any significant period of time, right? If you want to invest in this chart, go for it, but you're not going to end up with more Bitcoin as a result of this, right? The main risk with MicroStrategy stock. Obviously, I think there's less risk with MicroStrategy than with these other tokens. However, there are risks that MicroStrategy could mess up the Bitcoin management. They could have problems with their debt. They could have all kinds of problems with their narrative or with, they could be fraudulent. They could have those issues, right? I don't think that's likely. Of course, the other risk is some sort of counterparty. Whoops, I misspelled counterparty. There's some sort of counterparty risk, 6102, confiscation risk, custody risk. Obviously, these are the two big risks with MicroStrategy, and it's why I highly advocate you focus on Bitcoin self-custody instead of trading in these centralized tokens. But I think that the MicroStrategy board is going to do everything they possibly can to minimize these risks, right? Let's say there's a 10% chance of MicroStrategy stock going to zero in the next 10 years because the government seizes all their Bitcoin or something like that, right? That's a non-zero chance. I'm an optimist. I don't think it's likely. I hope the government is favorable to Bitcoin, Bitcoin regulation, and companies like MicroStrategy. But even with a 10% chance of MicroStrategy going to zero because of a 6102 nation-state attack, I think that that risk is dramatically less than the risks of these altcoins, right? You might say, oh, but I can quote-unquote self-custody XRP. Yeah, but you're looking at a token that's probably going to fall at least 75 or 80% against Bitcoin in the next couple months alone, right? A 10% total asset loss risk for MicroStrategy is still a lower downside risk than a very high probability, like an 80 or 90% probability of a 70 or 80% loss for XRP, right? This is the crazy thing. Even if MicroStrategy only had a 90% chance of surviving the next year or two, it is, I believe, still the best risk-adjusted bet for you out of these tokens, right? So conclusion here, let's get to conclusion time. I've been rambling a bunch. There is a non-zero chance, man, another typo. There is a non-zero chance we have a mega bull run with Bitcoin, right? Again, we have nation states openly talking about having strategic Bitcoin reserves. We have the Magnificent Seven, major corporations openly talking about buying Bitcoin and putting it on their treasury. We have billionaires. We have convertible notes, right? We have principal protected notes. We have all kinds of new demand coming to Bitcoin. Everybody wants Bitcoin. They're not coming to XRP. They're not coming to Solana. They're not coming to Ethereum. Maybe they will someday, and you can speculate on that and gamble on that. But as the way the chips are falling right now, they just don't have that interest in those other tokens, right? All the people coming into Bitcoin that want to be the degenerates, that want to buy the asset because of volatility, what are they going to buy? They're going to buy MicroStrategy, right? Like most of you that own these tokens, Solana, XRP, Ethereum, you're actually buying them for the volatility. You don't care what Solana does. You don't care what XRP does. You don't care what Ethereum does. You want the volatility. And when regulated investors, institutional investors, experienced investors enter the market, and they also want volatility to make more money, I think they're going to trend to the MicroStrategy trade. I don't think they're going to trend to these altcoins. We have less in common with the near future than the past. I think that we have less in common with Bitcoin's near future than the past. And I think that maybe we haven't quite reached peak altcoin degeneracy in Bitcoin's history in real terms, but maybe in comparing to Bitcoin's market cap, maybe we have, right? So my point is that there's a non-zero chance Bitcoin just goes to 300,000. It just goes to $1 million. It just goes to $500,000. There's a chance that we don't have the same kind of bear market, right? Maybe we have a 30 or 40% correction, but down to 80% correction. I certainly don't know. But what I do know is that, in my opinion, it's the only logical option. Now, of these four options, Solana, XRP, Ethereum, or MicroStrategy, the best option of those is the one not in a zero-sum game against Bitcoin and against that mega bull run. If we have this mega bull run for Bitcoin, it is directly going to benefit MicroStrategy because MicroStrategy is not in a zero-sum game against Bitcoin when all the others are in a zero-sum game against Bitcoin. MicroStrategy, in my opinion, is the best optimal risk-adjusted investment here, right? Nation states are coming for digital capital. Bitcoin is the only one that is digital capital. Solana is not digital capital. Ethereum is not digital capital. XRP is not digital capital. Neither is MicroStrategy, right? And so even if these centralized tokens rise in terms of US dollars, which I believe is very likely, I do think all three of those tokens will be higher a year from now. That does not mean they're up in terms of Bitcoin. Your hurdle rate is not the US dollar rate for your token. Your hurdle rate is the Bitcoin pair for that token. I've said this like 10 or 20 times now in this video, but it's really critical and people still aren't thinking like Bitcoin as a unit of account. You really have to start thinking like that. On a risk-adjusted basis, trading is almost certainly not a good idea. You also have to keep in mind, after you subtract taxes, how many hours did you invest in this little trading portfolio of yours, and how much stress did you have with this portfolio? If you make a $100,000 profit, but you spend 2,000 hours managing that portfolio, you've only made 50 bucks an hour. If you were smart enough to actually successfully trade the cycle, you're probably definitely smart enough to build a big business, right? Like, if you're dumb, you shouldn't trade because you're dumb. And if you're smart, why on earth are you trading? Because the return on investment for your time yields such a greater result investing in somewhere else, like a business integrated with Bitcoin. There is no second best. Hodl self-custody Bitcoin. Get off exchanges, hold self-custody Bitcoin. The only risk with Bitcoin is a risk of loss. Let's say there's a 5% chance you're going to lose your Bitcoin and make a self-custody error. That means that you're going to have a 95%, you're going to be left with 95% of your capital, right? MicroStrategy, maybe it's going to 2.7x this cycle against Bitcoin. And maybe there's a 10% chance it goes to zero, right? That means that on a risk-adjusted basis, your downside is pretty low, your upside is pretty high. Now, comparing to Solana, Ethereum, and XRP, they also have potentially decent upsides against Bitcoin if you want to believe the bull market hopium narrative, but their downsides are super high. And even if you have the successful trade in the next, this is what I think people really need to internalize. Even if you end up in profit, that doesn't necessarily mean it was the best risk-adjusted trade. And if you don't get disciplined and pursuing only the best risk-adjusted trades and actions, then you are probably going to make a big mistake in the future, right? Just like how maybe you win the lottery, maybe you win at the casino, but that doesn't mean that going there in the first place was the best risk-adjusted move. Okay, in all probability, it wasn't. And by you training that into your mind that you did something irresponsible and you won as a function of it, that mental factor is increasing the probability you're going to go back and do it again and again and again and double down, double down, double down. You're probably investing in these altcoins because you feel like you don't have enough Bitcoin. This is why I pander to the hopium. This is why I pander to the big price predictions of Bitcoin. I want to shake you into some sense to understand you are so early to Bitcoin, you don't have to accept that risk. You don't have to go to the casino. You don't have to gamble and try to get more return on your Bitcoin. You can just hold the actual thing. If you are going to gamble, you might as well gamble with the one that is the least ridiculous gamble, right? So here's a little graphic to kind of give more of a visual representation of what I'm thinking the future is going to hold for the altcoin and Bitcoin market in the future, right? In previous cycles, we had a very predictable 4-year cycle. Money flows from Bitcoin to altcoins as people's risk tolerance grows and as people pursue volatility and they go to the casino. However, with the development of only more Bitcoin related securities, right? Like Marathon, like MicroStrategy, like Bitcoin Well, like other, securities and tokens out there, right? Like MetaPlanet, right? As people have regulated options to gamble and speculate in volatility, I think they're going to be less likely to pursue unregistered options for gambling and volatility, right? And so in my opinion, the money flywheel is trending out of the unregistered securities market with altcoins and towards the securities market with Bitcoin. Now, you may not like this because I'm saying something that's in contradiction with your worldview, but the reality is that almost all of you agree with this, right? It's almost every person I talk to that is a Bitcoiner that is trading some percentage, whether it's 5%, 10%, 30%, whatever of their portfolio and these altcoins, they're going to sell at the top or whatever. It's like, I wish the best for you, but genuinely, you agree with me that these altcoins don't have a long-term future. Like, most of you agree with that. And guess what? Most of the people that are also in that trade with you also agree with that. And so it's going to be a race to who can sell the top the fastest, right? You're going to be competing against everybody. And the only people that are going to actually win in that trade are the people that are obsessing about managing that portfolio nonstop. You probably aren't going to be doing that because most people aren't going to be the top 1% of researchers for market analysis or whatever that token, right? And so this is my point that the Bitcoin might change the dynamics of future bear markets, and MicroStrategy and similar registered securities, because they're not in a zero-sum game, it might change the dynamic of these Bitcoin bull markets. Because what happens is that as the Bitcoin market cap goes up, more people pile in, then more people pile into altcoins. That's a zero-sum game effect. Capital leaves Bitcoin, goes to the altcoins. That increases incentivized selling for the Bitcoin network, and therefore we have this big bear market crash. But if people are instead speculating in volatile assets that are not in a zero-sum game with Bitcoin, that means that there is less sell pressure on Bitcoin because people can satisfy that degenerate volatility dopamine addict scenario without resulting in more selling of Bitcoin price. So Bitcoin companies like MicroStrategy might not only be the undermining of altcoins, but it also might change the next bear market. I'm not saying it will, and I'm not saying there won't be a bear market. I do think there will be a bear market, but I think maybe the dynamics of the next bear market will change. Maybe instead of a 80% crash, we get a 60% crash. Maybe instead of an 18-month crash, we get a 2-year crash that's a lower percentage, right? I don't know how it could change, but I do think the dynamic of the cycle, instead of being a Bitcoin altcoin crash cycle, a Bitcoin securities, Bitcoin, back and forth for crash, I think that might change things a little bit, right? So here's a visual explanation of what I'm meaning, right? So in the screen square over here, we have new demand coming into Bitcoin, coming into tokens and digital assets, right? Then we have Bitcoin, which in my opinion is going to be absorbing the vast majority of this new demand, right? No nation state is going to adopt an XRP strategic reserve. It's just so ridiculous. Sorry. Oh, Putin's gonna have a XRP strategic reserve. Oh my goodness, XRP to $1,000. Okay. Anyway, my point is the majority of demand is going for Bitcoin. It's not going to these digital tokens, right? Now, these tokens have only more competitors because really what these tokens are selling, what they're really selling is volatility. You're not buying Solana XRP or Doge or Shiba because you care about the tech. It's a meme. It's a joke. You're buying it because of the volatility and you're speculating on which meme is going to have the most volatility in the future. That's all you're doing. Let's just be brutally honest about it. You're buying these things for the sake of volatility, but the problem is there is ever more competition in these unregistered securities for only less demand, right? Like, do you understand that? That when there's more and more competition, when it can be infinitely replicable outwards with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of competing memes, also trying to convince you to dump your capital into them so that they can be more volatile, so that you can be convinced that you're going to make a profit, right? Like an addict at a casino machine, right? It's like there's only more competition for a small section of the market. Whereas you have MicroStrategy or similar stocks, and of course there are other Bitcoin stocks that I'm not mentioning here, but I'm just, again, elaborating on MicroStrategy for the sake of the video. I have to have some sort of narrow focus here, right? What if there was more demand going into MicroStrategy alone than the entire altcoin market at some point in the future, and there was only one competitor? Nobody can catch Michael. Nobody else can buy 420,000 Bitcoin. Amazon can't buy 420,000 Bitcoin. Microsoft can't buy 420,000 Bitcoin, right? There's maybe 1 or 2 companies in the world that could possibly buy more Bitcoin than Michael Saylor, and I don't think they're going to figure it out in time, right? My point is, you have a monopoly of the convertible notes for Bitcoin, where people can get that volatility itch scratched with options and convertible notes, and then you have all the altcoins. It's like all the people coming in that are only going to ape in Bitcoin for the volatility. Where do you think they're going to go? I think they're going to go to MicroStrategy. And so I think on a risk-adjusted basis, this is going to be the way to go. And the important point is that if you look at my little graphic here, it's not a zero-sum game. Capital flows into Bitcoin, right? You have new demand. That most of that capital flows into Bitcoin. Some of that capital flows into MicroStrategy, which you can think of as a refinery for Bitcoin. And when people give MicroStrategy that capital, they can convert that capital back into Bitcoin, which then boosts the share price, which then boosts Bitcoin, right? It's not a zero-sum game, whereas these tokens are a zero-sum game. So for the same reason, I think this is a more moral stance to take, that it is going to accelerate Bitcoin to a greater degree. And on the same token, I literally think that means that you're going to have more profit. You're going to have greater returns. Okay, I think that's the irony, is that the boring traditional finance stock is going to outperform most of the meme tokens, in my opinion. Now, again, caveat I should say to all this. Personally, I highly recommend you focus on self-custody Bitcoin. Do not focus on XRP. Do not focus on Doge, right? And don't even focus on MicroStrategy. Okay, I talk about it a lot because people ask me about it a lot, right? Likewise, I'm talking about these altcoins now because people are asking me about them, or we're getting to that point in the cycle. But my point is, focus on Bitcoin and focus on self-custody Bitcoin. That is my strong recommendation, okay? Avoid quote-unquote trading for quote-unquote returns, especially in degenerate centralized tokens that you yourself don't believe have a future. Because everybody else that's also speculating in them doesn't believe they have a future, right? Or at least the vast majority of them, right? However, if you are going to ignore my advice, if you are going to trade like a degen, you might as well trade and gamble in the bet that is most likely to actually have returns in your favor, most morally aligned with your beliefs and with the acceleration for neutral global money, which is Bitcoin, and the least likely to rug pull you. MicroStrategy is, in my opinion, the most likely to give you Bitcoin performance faster than Bitcoin returns itself. I believe MicroStrategy is the most morally aligned with accelerating neutral money for the world, and I believe MicroStrategy of these options is the least likely to rug pull you. So why on earth would you play with any of the other tokens, these three, or Doge, or Shiba, or Cardano, or whatever else? Why would you gamble on that when you can gamble on a different token for a similar upside and less downside risk? Okay. Or you could just stick to buying Bitcoin before it goes to 3 million bucks. Again, your biggest problem is not that you're too late to Bitcoin. Your biggest problem is that, if anything, you're too early to Bitcoin and you don't understand how cheap this thing is, right? You're gambling on different islands, on the coastline when you have Manhattan right in front of you, and you say, oh, I'm too late because there's a 2-story wooden building. Do you understand that pretty soon all of these skyscrapers are coming here? Nobody's going to be building these skyscrapers in Jersey, right? No offense. Nobody's going to be building these skyscrapers in these other states or other, coastline cities nearby. It's all going to be Manhattan, and it's all going to be this portion of Manhattan, right? It's the same thing with Bitcoin. You're not too late to Bitcoin. If anything, you're too early. And the evidence of that is that people are so early to Bitcoin. They're getting sucked into these scams, into these gambles, and these other tokens that are actively cannibalizing and destroying their wealth. Okay. You know that all these tokens are trending to zero against Bitcoin. Okay. Most of you that are speculating in these tokens are to some degree Bitcoin maxis. Even the altcoin degenerates that believe proof of stake is the future and blockchain technology is going to change the world, even those people price all their altcoins in terms of Bitcoin. Everybody in the general crypto sphere uses Bitcoin as their unit of account. Everybody already knows this. It's just a matter of the light bulb going off and people realizing, oh, why am I still here? Why am I still doing this? Right? Why are you playing with the radioactive lava that are these unregistered centralized tokens when you could just play with fire that is the centralized tokens that actually have a Bitcoin treasury behind them? Again, XRP does not have a treasury of 420,000 Bitcoin. XRP, sorry. Oh, I just can't. XRP doesn't have a evocative, passionate CEO going out there convincing everybody to buy his security, right? That's what Michael Saylor is. Michael Saylor is his own meme, right? Actually, if I can get into that one more point here. Okay, talking about the meme here real quick, let me just show you how much memeability you don't think MicroStrategy is a meme coin? Okay, MicroStrategy is a meme coin, right? And again, I'm saying this jokingly to convince you to buy MicroStrategy over the more degenerate things, but at the same time, again, I'm emphasizing MicroStrategy is not Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is not self-custody Bitcoin. On a risk-adjusted basis, still be very, very careful if they gamble on that. However, it is basically a meme coin, right? So this is MicroStrategy is going to be included in the NASDAQ 100 this Friday. Okay, again, do you see Doge being listed in the NASDAQ? XRP is going to be in the S&P 500. I mean, for goodness sakes, come on. It's like right in front of your face, right? There was way more demand coming for MicroStrategy than these other tokens, right? And so my point is, there's $2.1 billion this Friday, December 13th, 2024, that is going to enter MicroStrategy, okay? 2.093 billion, which is 2.1 billion. You literally can't make this meme up, okay? $2.1 billion is coming into MicroStrategy this Friday. 210 million shares, roughly, for MicroStrategy. And yes, I rounded that. A 2.1 net asset value. Yes, that was also rounded, but 21 million Bitcoin, which that's also rounded, by the way. 69% year to date is their quote unquote Bitcoin yield for Bitcoin so far, according to Michael Saylor. And they have stacked 420,000 coins. Okay. They just stacked 21,000 Bitcoin for 2.1 billion, 69% year to date. 420,000 Bitcoin. I mean, how many more memeable numbers do you want? That's like 5 or 6 instances of the number 24 or the number 21 that have appeared out of thin air. You have a 69, you have 420. MicroStrategy is the ultimate memeable stock. It's the ultimate degenerate trade. And if you're going to be trading to get more volatility, I strongly believe that sticking with the volatile trade, the new kind of volatile trade, is going to be what is going to give you the best returns. As I've said for years now, you have less in common with the near future than the ancient past. And my belief is that we are exiting the period where people pursue that volatility via the unregistered means, and they start to pursue volatility via the registered means. And people are still going to get wrecked. I think it is very likely that in a couple of years, when we have dozens and dozens of stocks all coming out with Bitcoin strategies, it's going to feel very similar to the dot-com bubble, where people would just slap on .com to their company's name to pump up their stock. I think that's what these registered companies are going to do in the not so distant future. They're going to slap on Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin to their companies, pump up their stock, and people are going to get wrecked. So I would say avoid trading in general. If you're going to trade and you're going to pursue that volatility, at least stick with the volatility coming in the future and not the volatility of the past. And again, if you're going to gamble, you might as well at least gamble smartly, and hopefully you're at least going to gamble on the thing that is probably not going to rug pull you, right? And I think that microcellular MicroStrategy of these options is the least likely to rug pull you. However, Bitcoin will never rug pull you. You don't have to trust the XRP escrow account. You don't have to trust Vitalik Buterin. You don't even have to trust Michael freaking Saylor. You can trust nobody when you actually buy Bitcoin because the protocol cannot rug pull you, right? So, of all these options, though, there is a really big risk, okay? Your biggest risk of all, in my opinion, though, is actually not anything I've talked so far in this video, okay? It is bad custody, tax, lawfare, and estate planning. And I know people don't like to hear this message, right? Just like I've been pretty critical most of this video, hopefully in a cheerful and constructive way. I'm going to be the same thing here, and this might hit a nerve or two. This might hit a touch point, but it's really important, okay? Without proper planning, your kids are going to lose the majority of the Bitcoin you've worked to stack for them, assuming you spend nothing in the remainder of your life. I'm saying this because you have the ability to take action right now. You have the ability to reduce risk right now, okay? I want you to look at this little graphic and put in your own percentages. I'm not saying this percentage is true for you, but put in your own percentage. You have your current Bitcoin stack, that orange bar at the top, okay? Let's say you have another 30 years to live, okay? Great, wonderful. You have 30 more years with us here on Earth. Let's say over the course of the next 30 years, you have a 90% chance of holding 100% of your Bitcoin and not losing a single Satoshi due to a hack, due to loss, due to a lawsuit, due to taxes, or anything like that. I think that is very optimistic. A 90% chance of success over the course of 30 years, correctly planning and mitigating all single points of failure from a custody, tax, and legal perspective. I think a 90% successful rate over the next 30 years is a very optimistic perspective. I think that's very, very generous. Frankly, probably a lot of you are not going to be keeping 90% of your Bitcoin over the course of the next 30 years because there's so much difficulty in front of us, right? But let's assume that. Let's assume you only lose 10% over the course of the next 30 years. Then let's assume your family has a 75% chance of being successful, of finding your Bitcoin, right? Maybe you have your Bitcoin on some little treasure map that you've given your family. Maybe you're teaching your kids how to manage Bitcoin keys. Maybe you're doing all that, right? And because your family's unique, special snowflakes that are magical, that don't make any losses and that actually care about Bitcoin as much as you, right? Maybe you're different and you're special and you're sure that they're not going to mess anything up. But let's be realistic. They're probably going to make some mistake because they haven't been obsessing over Bitcoin to the same degree you've been obsessing over Bitcoin. And if you're going to lose 10% of your Bitcoin over the next 30 years, you can surely bet there is some probability they're not even going to discover the Bitcoin in the first place. So let's say realistically, there's a 75% chance that they're successful and recover your Bitcoin. Maybe you have 4 Bitcoin on 4 different single SIGs and they successfully recover 3 of the 4, right? Let's say you've got 40 coins and they successfully find 30 of the coins, right? Let's say you've got 2 Bitcoin and they only lose half a Bitcoin or whatever, right? Let's be optimistic and assume that your family successfully recovers 75% of your Bitcoin. Now let's keep in mind the government perspective, right? If your family inherits this Bitcoin, they have 2 options. They can either lie to the government under oath and evade taxes and say they lost it in a boating accident, in which case they're going to be running from the government forever. And if they ever spend from that wallet address, the government's going to know they're lying and is going to come after them. They're going to be very punitive, right? Or they can pay 40% at state tax. Those are your 2 options. Okay, most people in Bitcoin have not yet considered estate taxes when it comes to the Bitcoin wealth. And maybe you don't like the fact I'm bringing it up, but it's true. Most people have not considered that. That's 40 freaking percent you're giving to the state. And the only other option for you to not give it to the state is for your family to be on the run forever. Which, of course, if you're in a war-torn area or if your life's in danger, obviously, I would say run. But if you're in a Western nation, you're probably not going to do that. Your family's probably not going to lie under oath to keep all that Bitcoin, right? They're going to have 10 coins. Bitcoin's going to be 10 million bucks a piece. They're going to have a $40 million tax bill or whatever, whatever, right? My point is that that's a 40% loss of the Bitcoin. And then let's assume your family in the following years or decades loses only a third of that Bitcoin in the coming years, right? These are a lot of assumptions here. My point is Once you factor in the intangible risk of all these things, the odds are very high that you are not going to have the majority of your Bitcoin actually make it to your kids. It's going to go to scammers. It's going to go to the state. It's going to go to people coming after your coins, right? Maybe you have maybe you say, oh, this is too paranoid. This is too pessimistic or whatever, right? And this is actually, what if there's only a 20% loss? Combine all these risks, the probability of you losing Bitcoin in your lifetime, the probability of your family screwing up their recovery of the Bitcoin custody, the probability of your family not having the proper tax planning and losing somewhere between 20 to 40% to estate taxes, plus then the ongoing management of that Bitcoin by your family. Combine all that, maybe you're somehow only at 20% risk. That combine all that together, like maybe that's you. That's still a massive amount of money. If you've got 10 Bitcoin, 20% of 10 Bitcoins, 2 Bitcoin at $10 million of Bitcoin, that's a $20 million problem you have staring at you in the face. Your biggest risk is not your 10% little altcoin portfolio, even though the whole first part of this video, I've been railing down again to not trade the altcoins because it's a big risk. Your far bigger risk is that you don't have the proper planning with the Bitcoin you already do own. Why are you focused on getting a Bitcoin yield or trying to stack more Bitcoin when you haven't even protected the Bitcoin that you have? You've got one Bitcoin, you're trying to get to that second Bitcoin, but the fact of the matter is that if something happened to you right now and you got hit by a bus, probably most of that Bitcoin, your family and kids may not actually get. Maybe they would, maybe they get half of it, maybe they get 90% of it, but the easiest thing for you to do right now is to just secure that Bitcoin, lock it down. You don't have to think about it again. And then you can focus again on buying more Bitcoin and stacking more Bitcoin. This is something that I think is really, really important to keep in mind. Now, I talked about something similar in yesterday's video, and I got a really good comment from somebody. And I just want to end the video on this note here because I think it's really important and, something for everyone, including myself, to keep in mind. Not just when it comes to Bitcoin, not just when it comes to risk, but when it comes to life in general, being grateful in general, and all of that wonderful stuff. Give me 1 second to pull this up here. By the way, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Do all that wonderful stuff. I hate to say that, but the algorithm really does like it when I say that. So if you were to like and subscribe, share this video with their friends. If your friend is one of these people that is speculating in these altcoins because they think they're going to outperform Bitcoin, just please send this video to them. My hope with this video is that, it sucks in lots of people that are trying to trade these altcoins for Bitcoin and hopefully smacks some sense into them, just things to think about. That's my big encouragement more than anything. So please like, comment, subscribe, share this video with friends. But getting into my final point here of the video, I had this great comment from yesterday. I was talking about something similar when it comes to Bitcoin estate planning, when it comes to protecting the Bitcoin that you have. And somebody, I'm not making fun of this person. This person commented and said, Luke, you lose me on your hysterical stuff at the end about risk. You don't pay tax on Bitcoin when you haven't sold. I agree we should prepare, but I think we have time to sort this stuff. I'll probably shoot you a text later or whatever, right? And I get it, right? You're probably not going to die. So this graphic here, this probably isn't going to face you in the next 12 months. It probably isn't, right? You have a 99% chance of living for the next year, right? Now, there's a 100% chance you're going to die because I'm going to die, you're going to die, everybody watching this video is going to die. But let's not even say 1%. Let's say 0.5% chance. There are 40,000 people that follow me on my different social media accounts. 40,000 people. If 0.5% die in the next year, that's 200 people. They're not going to be with us a year from now. Okay? I say that not to be melodramatic, but I say that because to me, you all are more than numbers on a screen. To me, Bitcoin is more than numbers, right? To me, this is people. That's 40,000 people. That's a stadium worth of people. And 0.5%, 1 in 200 of these 40,000 people, this is their last year on Earth, right? For 99.5% of you, you can ignore this message. But for 1 out of 200 of you, for goodness sake, hug your kids, man. This is your last Christmas. This is your last New Year's, right? You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe you're in a car accident. I was in a car accident last year at 50 miles an hour. I could have died. Granted, I was fine, and the other guy in the other car was fine, but I have had 2 near-death experiences in my life. And I'm only 25, okay? We are really bad at quantifying risk when it comes to altcoins, when it comes to fiat currency, and when it comes to life itself. We have a fixed number of days here on Earth. And I strongly encourage you, treat every day like it's precious, because it is. Treat every day with gratitude. Hug your kids. Tell your family you love them. Do things in your life that actually mean something to you. Don't just hold that Bitcoin, waiting for it to go to the moon, perpetually one cycle out in the future. Enjoy life today. Travel now. Spend money on your family now. Donate to causes you care about now. Get right with God now. Make new friends now. Like, there is a non-zero chance this is your last year on Earth. And if we're reasonable and assume it's a 0.5% chance, and there's 4,000 people that watch this video, 20 of you, this is your last year here on Earth. And so, yes, for 3,980 of you watching this, maybe you can say, and be correct, that, oh, it's hysterical, it's just paranoia, you're fear-mongering, we probably have time, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and that's fine. For 3,980 of the 4,000 of you watching, that's true. But for 20 of you watching, this is your reality. For 20 of you watching, you're going to get a cancer diagnosis within the next year. For 20 of you watching, you're going to have a car accident. For 20 of you watching, you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke. I'm just being brutally honest, and nobody wants to tell you these things. Nobody wants to tell you about the 40% estate tax. Nobody wants to tell you about the reality that once you factor in the 5 different risk points of your Bitcoin getting from you to your kids, that probably they're going to lose most of it. It's like nobody tells you this stuff because it's not good for views or good for clickbait to say that some of you are going to die. But I have already had people following me that are not with us anymore, right? I've been making content for a few years now. I have had multiple people that follow me no longer be with us. And that's very sad, you know, like you all are people to me. You're not just numbers. And I'm not saying all this. I'm not saying all this for you, actually. I'm saying it for me. Okay. 4,000 of you are watching. 0.5% of you are not going to be here the next year. That's 20 people watching this very video. Like one of these videos of mine you watch is going to be the last time you ever hear from me ever again. And of the 20 that pass, in the next year, there's going to be a handful of people, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, I don't know. There's going to be a handful of people that reach out in the next year, spouses, kids, nephews, they'll reach out to me and say, Luke, what do I do? And I'm the guy. I'm the guy that has to tell them there's very little I can do, okay? I have had this conversation dozens of times where people have some sort of major failure point that has been exploited, and there is nothing I can do. They want to talk to me about some sort of trust or legal protection for the Bitcoin because they're currently being served papers at some sort of lawsuit. And I got to tell them, I'm sorry, it's too late. When papers are served, there's nothing I can do. Luke, can you help me with the Bitcoin custody stuff? I think we might have lost, a couple of our coins. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I've had those conversations with grandkids where they say their grandparent lost dozens of Bitcoin because in the last couple of months, they were scammed out of them. I've had that conversation where people have lost, 10 coins, 20 coins because of some hack. I've had these conversations. And so, yeah, for 90% of you, 95% of you, this doesn't apply because you're magical, you're special, you're going to make through life with no problems at all, and you have time. But the biggest lie of all is that you have time. Okay? The people that are the fiat maxis, what do they want you to think? They want you to think you have time. I don't have to learn about Bitcoin right now because I have time. We'll figure it out later. I don't have to learn about protecting my Bitcoin right now because I have time. We'll figure it out later. And I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to the 99% of you that aren't going to die in the next year. I'm talking to the future. I'm talking to the future to clear my own conscience because I don't want to have some person reach out to me in the future and say, Luke, why didn't you warn me about XRP? I'm not making this video for you. I'm making it for me. I want to know that within a year or two, when another person reaches out to me and says that, hey, my loved one died, I don't know how to access their Bitcoin. Or, hey, I have my Bitcoin, but I'm in some lawsuit now. Or, hey, I had all these different custody setups and I think I lost 15% of my Bitcoin. When those people come to me, and they do come, I want to be able with a clear conscience to look them in the eye via the screen and say, I'm so sorry. I did everything I possibly could to tell you about this risk. And I failed. I didn't make that message clear enough. I tried in every video to get you to think about these things. I said again and again and again, I don't care what you do. Hire me to help you do this or do it on your own. But whatever you do, for goodness sakes, do it. Because the biggest lie is that you have time because you don't have time. If Bitcoin were to go to $500,000 in the next year or two, that is max pain. Because I'm telling you, nobody in Bitcoin has considered this, or very few people in Bitcoin have considered these things. and are actually actively preparing for these things. And it's going to be a mad rush of everyone to figure all these things out at once. And it's going to be chaotic, right? You are not prepared for 10x in your Bitcoin net worth. You just aren't, right? So to summarize this point, the point I'm trying to make is that you can call me hysterical. You can call me a fearmonger. You can say I have an incentive for my own sales pitch. Of course, you can contact me, information in the link in the description below. Do all those things. But the reality is that some of you aren't going to be here a year from now, right? Okay, for some reason we have Elon showing up here. Anyway, the picture's not loading, but you understand my point, right? Reach out to me, contact me. My phone number is a link in the description below. You can contact me via email. You can book a call with me. I'm doing everything I possibly can to warn you about these things. Don't take unnecessary risk. Don't gamble in these tokens, man. Just buy Bitcoin and self-custody. And once you actually think about if something happened to me, what are the odds my family would get it? If something were to happen to me, how much would be taken away for tax upon my death? If something were to happen to me, who would be guiding my wife or kids to manage this Bitcoin over time? Ask yourself those questions. You're going to realize 20% of the Bitcoin you have is going to disappear. 50%, 70% easily is going to disappear, right? So you can call me hysterical for, encouraging you to take action on this stuff now, but I have seen these things happen. I've had these calls with people, and I'm making this video for me. I'm not making it for you. I'm clearing my own conscience so that for the 20 of you watching that this is your last year here on Earth, I with a clear conscience can say, I tried to warn you. Enjoy Christmas, enjoy your family, enjoy every day of this beautiful world that we're in. Love your kids, stack Bitcoin. Don't be a degenerate. Don't trade, and take your Bitcoin self-custody seriously. Take your Bitcoin estate planning seriously, because if you don't, somebody else will. And that's my encouragement for today. So anyway, I tried to be as cheerful and constructive as I possibly could be, talking about sensitive topics today. But if you appreciate this video, please like, comment, subscribe, do all the wonderful things. And most importantly, reduce your risk. Get off zero, get some Bitcoin, reduce your altcoin exposure, right? Transition from a trader mindset to a long-term savings mindset, and actually take the custody, tax, and legal planning of your Bitcoin seriously. Because if you don't, your kids are only going to be left with 30 to 70% of what you've worked so hard to stack for them. And if Bitcoin's going to be a multi-million-dollar asset, that is a multi-million-dollar mistake just sitting there right in front of your face. That is so easy to resolve. Okay, reach out. Information link in the description below. Thanks for your time. I'll see you in the next video.